The billionaire stood frozen on the snow-covered sidewalk, staring through a bakery window at a scene that would haunt him forever. A little girl pressing her face against the glass, tears streaming down her cheeks as her mother whispered words no child should ever hear on their birthday. In that single moment, Ethan Callaway's entire world cracked open. What happened next would change 3 lives in ways none of them could imagine. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey travels. The conference room on the 42nd floor smelled like expensive cologne and desperation. Ethan Callaway sat at the head of the table, his fingers drumming against the polished mahogany surface as 5 board members argued about market projections he'd stopped caring about 20 minutes ago. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, New York City sprawled beneath a darkening sky, lights beginning to flicker on like scattered diamonds. Mr. Callaway, if we could just get your approval on the Singapore expansion, fine, whatever you think is best. Ethan's voice carried the particular brand of exhaustion that came from years of pretending to care about things that didn't matter. He was 32 years old and worth more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, and every single day felt like walking through fog. David Chen, his CFO and one of the few people who'd known him before the money, shot him a concerned look across the table. They'd have words about this later. They always did. The meeting dragged on another 40 minutes. By the time Ethan escaped to the elevator, the winter sun had completely disappeared, replaced by the kind of cold that turned the city cruel. He loosened his tie. Custom-made, probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, not that he'd ever bothered to check the price, and watched the floor numbers descend. His driver was waiting outside the building, but Ethan waved him off. "I'll walk." "Sir, it's 18 degrees. "I'll walk, Marcus. Go home to your family." The look Marcus gave him said everything his employee couldn't. You should go home to your family too. Except Ethan didn't have one. Not anymore. Not for the past 4 years, 3 months, and 16 days, but who was counting? The city moved around him in currents of hurried bodies and honking taxis. Ethan shoved his hands into his coat pockets, cashmere lined with silk, worth a fortune and keeping him about as warm as his empty apartment would, and started walking with no particular destination in mind. This had become his routine. Work until his brain shut down, then walk until his body did the same. He'd made it 6 blocks when the snow started falling. Fat, wet flakes that clung to his hair and shoulders. The kind of snow that would turn the streets into a mess by morning. People around him picked up their pace, ducking into subway entrances and storefronts. Ethan just kept walking. That's when he saw the bakery. It wasn't anything special, a small corner shop wedged between a dry cleaner and a bodega, the kind of place he'd normally walk past without noticing. But something made him stop. Maybe it was the warm yellow light spilling onto the sidewalk. Maybe it was the way the snow seemed to slow down near the windows, like even the weather wanted to linger there. Or maybe it was the little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old, pressed up against the glass like she was trying to crawl inside the display. Her coat was too thin for the weather, patched at the elbows with fabric that didn't quite match. Her breath fogged up the window as she stared at the cakes inside with an intensity that made Ethan's chest ache. Next to her stood a woman who had to be her mother. 30, maybe, though she looked older in the way people did when life had worn them down early. Her coat wasn't much better than the girl's. She had one hand on her daughter's shoulder, and even from 15 feet away, Ethan could see her lips moving, could see the way her whole body seemed to curve inward like she was trying to make herself smaller. He should have kept walking. He had a dinner meeting in an hour. Some venture capitalist who wanted to pitch him on cryptocurrency or AI or whatever the hell the new gold rush was this week. He should have kept walking. He didn't. Ethan moved closer, close enough to hear their voices through the glass and the falling snow. "Maybe just a small one?" the little girl was saying. Her voice had that particular quiver that came right before tears. "The one with the pink flowers? It doesn't have to be big, Mama." The woman, the mother, squeezed her daughter's shoulder. "Sophie, baby, we talked about this." "I know, but it's my birthday." The last word broke in the middle, and the little girl, Sophie, pressed her forehead against the glass. "Just a little one?" The mother closed her eyes. In the yellow light from the bakery, Ethan could see moisture gathering at the corners. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. We can't right now. Maybe Maybe next year, okay? Next year, I promise we'll get you the biggest, prettiest cake in that whole window. It's okay, Mama. Sophie's voice had gone small and resigned, and that was somehow worse than the crying. Maybe next year. Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. He'd built an empire. He'd stood in front of thousands of people and given speeches about innovation and disruption and the future. He'd negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars without his pulse even flickering. But standing there on that snowy sidewalk, watching a little girl try not to cry over a birthday cake her mother couldn't afford, he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The mother was pulling Sophie away now, murmuring something about getting home before the snow got worse. Sophie took one last look at the bakery window, a long, hungry look that would probably stay with Ethan for the rest of his life, and then turned away. They started walking up the street, away from the bakery, away from Ethan. Two figures in thin coats disappearing into the falling snow, and any second now they'd turn a corner and be gone, and Ethan would never see them again, and he could just go to his dinner meeting and pretend this never happened. Any second now. Any second. Wait here, he told no one in particular, and walked into the bakery. A bell chimed above the door. The shop was small and warm, smelling like sugar and vanilla and everything Ethan's penthouse apartment would never smell like. An older woman behind the counter looked up from a tray of cookies, her face creasing into the kind of customer service smile that retail workers everywhere had perfected. Evening, what can I get for you? Ethan's eyes went to the display case. Rows of cakes in every size and color, each one probably representing a week's worth of groceries for some families. His stomach turned. That one. He pointed to the largest cake in the case, a 3-tier monstrosity covered in white fondant and pale pink roses, the kind of thing someone would order for a wedding or a fancy party. The big one. The woman's eyebrows went up. Oh, that one's actually already been ordered by, I'll pay double, triple, whatever, I need it now. She blinked at him. Ethan realized he probably looked insane. Some guy in a $1,000 coat standing in her bakery demanding a cake like his life depended on it. He forced himself to slow down, to breathe. Please, he said, and it came out rougher than he intended. It's important. Something in his face must have convinced her. She studied him for a long moment, then sighed. The customer isn't picking it up until tomorrow afternoon. I suppose I could make another one. She moved to the display case, carefully lifting out the massive cake. This one's $250. Ethan pulled out his wallet and threw $500 bills on the counter before she could finish boxing it up. Keep the change. And the fastest you can box, that would be, give me 2 minutes. It took 90 seconds. Ethan took the large white box, surprisingly heavy, the weight of it solid and real in his hands, and pushed back out into the cold. The snow was falling harder now, and for a terrifying moment, he thought they were gone, that he'd missed them, that he'd spend the rest of his life wondering what happened to a little girl who tried not to cry over a birthday cake. Then he spotted them. 2 thin figures half a block up, walking slowly through the snow. Sophie was holding her mother's hand, her head down, shoulders hunched against the cold. Ethan started walking faster, then jogging. The box was awkward in his hands, and he probably looked completely ridiculous. A billionaire in a cashmere coat chasing down strangers through the snow with a wedding-sized cake. But he didn't care. Wait, he called out. Please, wait. The mother turned first, her body immediately going tense, positioning herself slightly in front of her daughter, protection instinct. Ethan saw her eyes take him in. Expensive coat, expensive shoes, expensive everything, and watched her expression shift to wariness. He slowed down as he got closer, trying not to look threatening, which was harder than it should have been when he was breathing hard and holding a giant cake box. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I was at the bakery and I heard. He stopped, realizing he didn't have a plan for this, hadn't thought past the impulse to make sure this little girl got a birthday cake. Can I help you? The mother asked. Her voice was polite but guarded, one hand still firmly on Sophie's shoulder. Ethan looked down at Sophie. She was staring up at him with wide brown eyes, confused and a little scared. Snowflakes were catching in her hair, melting against her cheeks. I heard it's your birthday, he said to her. Sophie glanced up at her mother, then back at Ethan. Yes, sir. Well, I was picking up this cake, he held up the box slightly, and I realized I ordered way too much. I can't possibly eat all of this myself. And it seems like a shame to waste a perfectly good birthday cake on someone whose birthday isn't even today. He paused. Would you maybe want it? Sophie's eyes went huge. Mama? The mother, Ethan still didn't know her name, was looking at him like he might be dangerous. That's very kind, but we can't accept. Please. The word came out more desperate than Ethan intended. I know this is weird. I know I'm a complete stranger and you have no reason to trust me. But I promise I'm not. I just want to give her a birthday cake. That's all. No strings, no expectations, just a cake. The mother's jaw was tight. We don't take charity. It's not charity. It's just a cake. Ethan knelt down in the snow, not caring that it was soaking through his $1,000 pants, bringing himself to Sophie's eye level. How old are you today? 6, Sophie whispered. 6 is important. You only turn 6 once. He held out the box. And every 6-year-old deserves a birthday cake. Trust me on that one. Sophie looked up at her mother with such hopeful desperation that Ethan saw the exact moment the woman's resolve cracked. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and when she opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Thank you. Ethan stood up and handed over the box. It was too big for Sophie to carry alone, so her mother took it, holding it carefully like it might disappear if she wasn't careful. Thank you, mister, Sophie said, her voice suddenly bright. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Ethan shoved his hands back in his pockets, suddenly unsure what to do with them. Happy birthday, Sophie. He started to turn away, to leave them there with their cake and get back to his regularly scheduled life, but the mother's voice stopped him. Wait, please tell me your name. Ethan turned back. She was studying him with an expression he couldn't quite read, suspicion mixed with something that might have been hope, or maybe just exhaustion. Ethan, he said. Claire. She adjusted her grip on the cake box. And you already know Sophie. Hi, Sophie waved at him, suddenly animated. Do you want to come share the cake with us? Mama makes really good hot chocolate. Sophie, Claire started, but Ethan was already shaking his head. That's okay. You should enjoy it together. Family time. Something flickered across Claire's face at that. We live just a few blocks from here. The apartment is small and the heater doesn't work great, but if you really have nowhere else to be... She trailed off, looking like she couldn't believe she was inviting a stranger to her home, but unable to stop herself. You gave us a cake. Least I can do is offer you a piece of it. Ethan should have said no. Should have made an excuse about his dinner meeting, about having to get back to work, about literally anything that would let him exit this situation gracefully and go back to his regular life. I'd like that, he heard himself say instead. Claire's apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up in a building that had probably been nice sometime in the 1970s. The stairs creaked under Ethan's feet and the hallway smelled like cooking grease and mildew. Claire walked ahead of him, Sophie practically bouncing beside her despite the long climb, still chattering about the cake. We can't eat it all tonight though, right, Mama? Because then it won't last? We'll see, baby. The apartment was exactly what Ethan had expected. 1 bedroom, a tiny bathroom, a main room that served as living room and kitchen combined. But it was clean, painfully, desperately clean, the kind of clean that came from someone fighting to maintain dignity in a situation that wanted to strip it away. A small Christmas tree sat in the corner, made of plastic and missing several branches, decorated with homemade ornaments. Claire set the cake box on the small table and immediately busied herself with clearing away papers and a half-finished mug of coffee. Sorry about the mess. I wasn't expecting company. It's fine. Ethan stood awkwardly in the doorway, feeling like an intruder. His coat alone probably cost more than everything in this apartment combined. You can sit down, Claire said, gesturing to one of 2 mismatched chairs at the table. Sophie, go wash your hands. Sophie ran off to the bathroom, leaving Ethan and Claire in a silence that felt heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. Claire moved to the kitchen area, really just a corner with a small stove and a sink, and started making hot chocolate. So, she said without turning around, her voice carefully casual, what brings a guy like you to this neighborhood? A guy like me? Your coat costs more than my rent. She still wasn't looking at him. Your shoes probably cost more than my car, if I had a car. Ethan looked down at his shoes, Italian leather, custom made, Not that he'd ever admit it out loud. I work nearby, was just walking. In this weather? In this neighborhood? Now she did turn around, and her eyes were sharp. Look, I appreciate the cake. More than you know. But I need to understand what's happening here. Because in my experience, men in $1,000 coats don't just hand out expensive cakes to strangers unless they want something. Fair enough. Ethan leaned back in the chair, which wobbled slightly under his weight. I heard you talking to Sophie, outside the bakery. Claire's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture, went a little more rigid, and Ethan trailed off, trying to find words for something he didn't fully understand himself. My mom raised me alone, after my dad left. I remember what it looked like when she had to tell me we couldn't afford something. I remember the exact way her face would change when she was trying not to cry in front of me. He met Claire's eyes. I saw that same look on your face tonight, and I couldn't just walk away. The silence stretched out between them. In the bathroom, Ethan could hear Sophie humming to herself as she washed her hands. I'm sorry, Claire said finally, her voice softer. That was rude of me. You were protecting your daughter from a stranger. That's not rude. That's good parenting. Claire's laugh was short and bitter. Good parenting would be being able to afford a $6 cake for my daughter's birthday. Good parenting is loving your kid more than your pride. Ethan watched her face carefully. I heard what she said. Maybe next year. And I heard what you said, that you promised her the biggest cake in the window next year. You're teaching her hope. That's worth more than any cake. Something in Claire's expression cracked, just a little. She turned back to the stove, stirring the hot chocolate with more focus than the task required. You don't know anything about my life. No, Ethan agreed. I don't. I work 50-hour weeks at a diner downtown. I've got student loans from a degree I never finished, and medical bills from when Sophie had pneumonia last winter, and rent that goes up every year while my paycheck stays exactly the same. Her voice was steady, but her knuckles were white on the spoon. And I'm still behind. I'm always behind. So forgive me if I'm suspicious when someone hands me a $200 cake like it's nothing. It is nothing, Ethan said quietly. Claire turned around fast, her eyes flashing. It's not nothing to me. I didn't mean... I know what you meant. She poured the hot chocolate into mugs, mismatched, one of them chipped, with sharp, precise movements. Money means nothing to you because you have it. But to me, to Sophie, that cake represents weeks of choosing between groceries and keeping the lights on. It represents every time I've had to tell my daughter, maybe next year, or we can't afford it, or I'm sorry. Her voice cracked on the last word. So don't tell me it's nothing. Ethan stood up, slowly. You're right. I'm sorry. That was thoughtless. Sophie bounded back into the room, breaking the tension. Can we open the cake now? Please, please, please. Claire took a breath, visibly composing herself, and turned to her daughter with a smile that looked like it physically hurt. Of course, birthday girl. Let's see what we've got. Opening the box was like revealing treasure. Sophie's gasp when she saw the full 3 tiers was worth every awkward moment leading up to it. The cake was ridiculous and excessive and absolutely perfect for making a 6-year-old feel like the most important person in the world. It's so beautiful, Sophie breathed. Mama, it's so beautiful. It really is. Claire's voice was thick. She looked at Ethan over her daughter's head, and the expression in her eyes was complicated, gratitude and resentment, and something that might have been understanding all mixed together. They ate cake and drank hot chocolate while Sophie talked nonstop about everything and nothing, her school, her friends, a stray cat she'd named Princess who lived in the alley behind their building. Claire mostly stayed quiet, watching Ethan with those sharp, cautious eyes, like she was trying to figure out a puzzle. Ethan found himself talking more than he had in months, maybe years. Something about this cramped apartment with its broken heater and mismatched furniture made him feel more human than he had in his penthouse. Sophie asked him questions. What do you do? Where do you live? Do you have kids? With the innocent directness of childhood, and he answered as honestly as he could without giving away too much. I work with computers, he said, which wasn't exactly a lie. Do you live near here? Sophie asked around a mouthful of cake. Not too far. Are you married? Sophie, Claire's voice was sharp. That's not polite to ask. It's okay. Ethan set down his fork. No, I'm not married. Not anymore. Something passed across Claire's face. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone who understood loss. She didn't ask for details, which Ethan appreciated more than she could know. It was Sophie who broke the moment, standing up on her chair to announce, "This is the best birthday ever." "Sit down before you fall," Claire said automatically, but she was smiling. A real smile this time, the first one Ethan had seen from her. Around 8:30, Sophie started yawning between bites of her second piece of cake. Claire caught Ethan's eye and gave a small nod toward the door, a polite but clear signal that it was time for him to leave. "I should get going," Ethan said, standing up. "Let you two enjoy the rest of your evening." "Thank you," Sophie said, jumping up to hug his legs with the unselfconscious affection of a child. "Thank you for my birthday cake." Ethan felt something painful and sweet twist in his chest. He patted her head awkwardly. "You're very welcome." Claire walked him to the door. In the small entryway, she crossed her arms over her chest, her expression guarded again. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Really, you didn't have to do any of this. I wanted to." "Why?" The question was blunt, direct. "And don't give me that line about your mom. There's more to it than that." Ethan looked past her into the apartment, where Sophie was carefully covering the remaining cake with the plastic lid from the box. 4 years ago, my wife died in a car accident. We'd been trying for a baby. He stopped, surprised at himself for sharing this. She was excited about being a mom, talked about birthday cakes and school plays and all these little moments she'd never get to have. Claire's expression softened. "I'm sorry." When I saw Sophie tonight, staring through that window, Ethan trailed off, not sure how to explain it. "I don't know. Maybe I wanted to give someone the kind of moment my wife never got to have. Maybe I just wanted to feel like something I did mattered." He met her eyes. "Maybe both." For a long moment, Claire just looked at him. Then she reached out and squeezed his hand once, quickly, before pulling back. "It mattered," she said. "To Sophie, to me. It mattered." Ethan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "Will you?" Claire hesitated. "Will you be okay getting home?" "I'll be fine." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. "Okay. Well, thank you again. For everything." Ethan left the apartment and made his way back down the creaking stairs and out into the snow, which was falling even harder now. The city looked different somehow, softer, less hostile. His phone had been buzzing in his pocket for the past hour. Missed calls from David, from his assistant, from the venture capitalist he'd stood up for dinner. He ignored all of them and started walking. He didn't head back to his apartment. Instead, he found himself walking through neighborhoods he normally only saw from the back of his town car. Past bodegas and laundromats and check-cashing places. Past people who looked like Claire, tired, determined, fighting battles he'd never have to face. It was past 11 when he finally made it back to his building. The doorman, a different one than usual, someone he didn't recognize, greeted him with professional courtesy as he tracked snow across the marble lobby floor. The elevator ride to the penthouse took 45 seconds. His apartment was exactly as he'd left it that morning, spotless, expensive, and completely empty. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, millions of lights spread out below him like he owned them. Which, in a way, he kind of did. Ethan poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey that cost more per bottle than Claire probably made in a month and stood at the window, staring out at nothing. His phone buzzed again. "David, where the hell have you been?" his CFO demanded when Ethan finally answered. "You missed the dinner with Harrison. He was pissed. I had to smooth it over and—" "Did you ever just stand outside a bakery and watch someone who couldn't afford a cake for their kid's birthday?" Ethan interrupted. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Are you drunk?" "Sober as a judge." "Then what are you talking about?" Ethan couldn't explain it. Didn't want to try. "Nothing. Forget it." What did Harrison want? They talked business for 20 minutes. Deals and projections and expansion plans that Ethan barely paid attention to. His mind kept drifting back to that cramped apartment with the broken heater and the little girl who'd been so careful to say, maybe next year, instead of crying. After he hung up with David, Ethan sat down at his laptop and did something he hadn't done in years. He started researching. Not market trends or tech innovations or investment opportunities. He looked up food insecurity statistics, average wages for service workers, the cost of living in New York for single parents. medical debt, student loans, the kind of numbers that didn't show up in his usual spreadsheets. The numbers were worse than he thought, much worse. Around 2 in the morning, Ethan made a phone call to his head of HR. "Sorry to wake you," he said when she answered, groggy and confused. "I need you to look into something for me tomorrow, quietly." "What kind of something?" "There's a diner, downtown. I need you to find out if they have any openings. Management positions, preferably. Good pay, benefits, normal hours." "Sir, are you looking for a restaurant investment?" "No. Just find out if they're hiring, and if they're not, make them hiring." Another long silence. "Is this about—" "Tomorrow," Ethan cut her off. "Quietly. No one else needs to know." He hung up before she could ask more questions. Then he called his foundation director. "Educational initiatives," Ethan said without preamble. "Scholarships for low-income kids. What would it take to expand that program?" "Well, we'd need to review the budget, establish criteria, set up application processes. How fast could you move on that?" "Fast? I don't know, maybe 6 months to a year to do it properly. You've got 3 months. And I want it need-based, not merit-based. Smart kids from poor families, kids whose parents work 50-hour weeks just to keep the lights on." He paused. "Kids who deserve birthday cakes." "Sir, I'm not sure I understand what—" "You don't need to understand. You just need to make it happen." Ethan spent the rest of the night at his desk, making calls and sending emails, and setting things in motion that he couldn't fully explain even to himself. All he knew was that he'd spent 4 years sleepwalking through a life that meant nothing, and tonight, for the first time since he'd lost his wife, he'd felt something crack open inside him. Something that hurt like hell, but also felt like maybe, possibly, it might be the first step toward feeling human again. As the sun started to rise over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Ethan stood at his window and thought about a little girl who tried not to cry over a birthday cake, and a mother who worked herself to exhaustion trying to give her daughter a life that didn't hurt quite so much, and the weight of a cake box in his hands that had somehow felt heavier than any business deal he'd ever closed. He didn't know what would happen next, didn't know if Claire would accept the help he was about to anonymously arrange for her, didn't know if any of it would make a difference. But for the first time in 4 years, Ethan Calloway felt like maybe his billions could actually mean something beyond numbers in an account he'd never spend. Maybe that was enough. Or maybe it was just the beginning. Only time would tell. 3 days later, Claire Dawson was elbow-deep in dirty dishwater at the Metro Diner when her manager called her into the back office. Her first thought was that she'd done something wrong. Her second thought was that she couldn't afford to lose this job. "Sit down, Claire," Frank said, gesturing to the metal folding chair across from his cluttered desk. He was 50-something, balding, with the perpetual exhaustion of someone who'd been managing the same diner for 20 years. Claire sat, her hands still damp from the sink, her heart hammering. "If this is about me leaving early on Tuesday, Sophie was sick, and I couldn't find anyone to—" "It's not about that." Frank shuffled some papers on his desk, not quite meeting her eyes. "Look, I'm just going to say this straight. Corporate called. They're doing some kind of restructuring thing, cutting positions." Claire's stomach dropped. "You're firing me." "No." "Jesus, no." Frank looked up, surprised. "The opposite, actually. They're moving me to the location in Queens and they need someone to step up here. Assistant manager position. Better hours, better pay, health insurance." He pushed a paper across the desk. "Benefits kick in after 30 days. Claire stared at the paper like it might bite her. The salary listed was nearly double what she made now. "I don't understand." "Neither do I, honestly. Corporate's been talking about cutting costs for months, then suddenly they're creating new positions?" Frank shrugged. "But hey, I'm not complaining. You've been here 4 years, you show up on time, customers like you. You want it or not?" Yes. Of course I want it." The words came out automatically, but Claire's mind was racing. This didn't make sense. Things like this didn't just happen to people like her. "Great, you start Monday. Lisa will train you on the management stuff." Frank stood up, clearly ready to end the conversation. "Oh, and they're doing something with scheduling too. No more split shifts, no more closing then opening. 40 hours a week, normal human hours." Claire walked back to the kitchen in a daze. She went through the motions of finishing her shift, cleaning tables, refilling coffee, smiling at customers who didn't tip. But her mind was somewhere else entirely. Health insurance, normal hours, enough money that maybe, just maybe, she could start actually saving something instead of constantly choosing which bill to pay late. It felt wrong somehow. Too good. Too easy. That night, after she'd put Sophie to bed, the little girl still riding high on birthday cake that they'd been rationing out all week, Claire sat at her kitchen table and stared at the assistant manager contract Frank had given her. She read it 3 times, looking for catches, for fine print that would explain why this was happening. There was nothing. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Claire almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Ms. Dawson? A woman's voice, professional and crisp. This is Jennifer Park from Riverside Property Management. I'm calling about your rental unit. Here it was, the catch. They were raising her rent again, or there'd been a complaint, or we've reviewed your account and there appears to have been an error in our billing system. You've been overcharged for the past 18 months. We're issuing a credit to your account that should cover your rent for the next 12 months. Claire's hand tightened on the phone. I'm sorry, what? I know it's unusual, but our system flagged the discrepancy during a recent audit. The credit should appear in your account within 48 hours. You'll receive written confirmation by mail. There must be some mistake. No mistake, Ms. Dawson. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Claire hung up without answering. She sat very still at her kitchen table, staring at nothing, her pulse loud in her ears. 2 pieces of good luck in one day. 2 impossibly good pieces of luck. She thought about the man who'd bought Sophie a birthday cake. Ethan. With his expensive coat and sad eyes, and the way he'd talked about his mother and his dead wife like the words cost him something. No. That was crazy. He'd bought them a cake, that was all. He had no way of knowing where she worked or where she lived or anything about her life beyond that one evening. This was just coincidence. Had to be. Except Claire had learned a long time ago that coincidences like this didn't happen to people like her. The next morning, she called the property management company back and asked to speak to Jennifer Park again. I just wanted to confirm about the billing error, Claire said carefully. Can you tell me when this audit was conducted? Let me check. Typing sounds in the background. Looks like the review was initiated last Thursday. The correction was processed on Monday. Thursday. 2 days before Sophie's birthday. 2 days before she'd met a stranger outside a bakery who'd somehow known exactly what to say to get past her defenses. Ms. Dawson, are you still there? Can you tell me who initiated the audit? I'm sorry. That information isn't available in my system. Is there a problem with the credit? No, no problem. Thank you. Claire spent the weekend in a state of low-grade panic mixed with something that felt dangerously like hope. She didn't tell Sophie about the job or the rent credit. Didn't want to jinx it. Didn't want to believe in it yet. Monday morning, she showed up at the diner for her first day as assistant manager. Lisa, the current manager, walked her through the new responsibilities: scheduling, inventory, handling customer complaints. It was overwhelming, but in a good way. The kind of busy that made her feel competent instead of just exhausted. Oh, and corporate sent over some new policy stuff, Lisa said, handing Claire a folder. Updated benefits package, professional development opportunities, all that jazz. Honestly, I don't know what got into them. They've been cheap as hell for years, and suddenly they're acting like they care about employee retention. Claire flipped through the folder. The health insurance was comprehensive: dental, vision, mental health coverage. There was information about tuition reimbursement programs, retirement matching, paid sick leave. When did all this start? She asked. The email came through last week. Thursday, I think? Someone high up must have had a come-to-Jesus moment about how we treat our workers. Lisa laughed. I'm not complaining. Thursday again. Claire's hands trembled slightly as she closed the folder. Over the next 2 weeks, more impossible things kept happening. The broken heater in her apartment was fixed by a repair crew that the landlord insisted was already scheduled. Sophie's school called to tell her that her daughter had been selected for a special after-school program, completely free, including transportation and meals. Claire's student loan servicer sent a letter saying she'd been approved for a hardship deferment she didn't remember applying for. Each thing by itself could be explained away. Together, they formed a pattern that Claire couldn't ignore. She tried to find Ethan. Asked around the neighborhood, checked with the bakery where they'd first met. The older woman who'd sold him the cake remembered him. Handsome guy, looked like money, paid cash, but had no other information. Claire even did something she felt ashamed about later. She Googled Ethan plus New York plus tech based on the vague information he'd given Sophie. The results were overwhelming. Hundreds of Ethans working in tech across the city. Then one evening, 3 weeks after Sophie's birthday, Claire was walking home from the diner when she passed a newsstand. A business magazine caught her eye. The cover showed a man in a dark suit standing in front of floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread out behind him. Tech's reluctant billionaire, inside Ethan Callaway's empire. Claire's breath caught. She bought the magazine with shaking hands and read it standing right there on the sidewalk while people flowed around her like water around a stone. Ethan Callaway, age 32. Founder and CEO of Callaway Technologies, worth an estimated $4 billion. Known for being reclusive, rarely giving interviews, living alone in a penthouse apartment in Tribeca after the death of his wife 4 years ago. The article mentioned his mother, who'd worked 3 jobs to support him as a child before dying of a heart attack when Ethan was 25. There was a quote near the end that made Claire's chest tighten. "I don't think wealth means anything if it doesn't change lives," Callaway had said in one of his rare public appearances. Real impact happens on an individual level, not in spreadsheets. Claire walked the rest of the way home in a fog. She tucked Sophie into bed, kissed her goodnight, then sat at her kitchen table with the magazine spread open in front of her. $4 billion. And he'd spent his evening eating birthday cake in her falling-apart apartment, drinking hot chocolate from chipped mugs, listening to her 6-year-old chatter about a stray cat. She thought about calling him. The magazine article mentioned Callaway Technologies' main office. She could probably find a number, leave a message with his assistant, demand to know if he was behind the sudden flood of good fortune in her life. But what would she say? "Thank you. Stop? I don't need your charity." Except it wasn't charity, was it? She was working for her new salary. The rent credit was supposedly a billing error. Sophie had earned her spot in the after-school program based on her teacher's recommendation. He'd been careful, made it all look legitimate, made it so she could accept the help without feeling like she was taking a handout. Claire picked up her phone 3 times that night and put it down 3 times. She drafted an email to his company's general contact address and deleted it. She even looked up his penthouse building on Google Maps and stared at the satellite image like that would give her answers. In the end, she did nothing. The weeks turned into months. Claire got better at her job, started actually enjoying it. The assistant manager position came with respect, from her coworkers, from customers, from herself. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building something. Sophie thrived in the after-school program, came home excited about art projects and science experiments and new friends. Her teacher called Claire in for a meeting and used words like gifted and advanced and real potential. "We'd like to recommend Sophie for the district's talented and gifted program," Mrs. Chen said. "It's competitive, but I think she'd be an excellent candidate." "I can't afford," Claire started automatically. "It's free, public school program, and there are scholarships available for any supplementary costs like field trips or materials." Of course there were. Claire signed the paperwork and tried not to think about how many strings were being pulled behind scenes she couldn't see. 6 months after Sophie's birthday, Claire walked past the bakery where it had all started. On impulse, she went inside. The same older woman was behind the counter. "Can I help you?" the woman asked with that retail perfect smile. "I was here a while back," Claire said. "There was a man who bought a large cake. 3 tiers, white and pink. He paid cash." Recognition flickered across the woman's face. "Oh, him, yeah, I remember. Looked like he'd seen a ghost or something. Threw money at me like the place was on fire." "Did he ever come back?" "Never saw him again." The woman studied Claire with open curiosity. "You know him?" "Sort of. Not really." Claire shook her head. "It's complicated." "Honey, it's always complicated when men like that are involved." The woman laughed. "You want anything? We've got a special on cupcakes today." Claire bought a half-dozen cupcakes, chocolate, Sophie's favorite, and walked home slowly. The neighborhood looked different now. Not because anything had physically changed, but because Claire's relationship to it had. She wasn't drowning anymore, wasn't constantly calculating how many days until the next paycheck, how to stretch $5 into meals for 2, which bill she could skip this month. She could breathe. That night, Sophie asked the question Claire had been dreading. "Mama, do you ever think about that man? The one who gave me my birthday cake?" They were sitting on the couch together, Sophie curled up against Claire's side, supposedly doing homework, but mostly just doodling in the margins of her math worksheet. "Sometimes," Claire admitted. "Why?" "I think about him a lot." Sophie's pencil moved across the paper, drawing what looked like a very tall building. "Do you think he's lonely?" The question surprised Claire. "What makes you ask that?" "He looked sad, even when he was smiling." Sophie added windows to her building, dozens of tiny squares. "Like he was pretending to be happy, but wasn't really." Claire's throat went tight. 6 years old, and already she could read people better than most adults. "Maybe he was," Claire said quietly. "Probably he was." "I wish we could see him again, to say thank you properly." "We thanked him at the time, baby." "I know, but—" Sophie frowned at her drawing. "I think he needed the thank you more than we needed the cake. Does that make sense?" It made perfect sense, actually. More sense than Claire wanted to admit. "We might not see him again," Claire said gently. "He was probably just passing through. People like him don't usually spend time in neighborhoods like ours." "But he did that night." "He did that night," Claire agreed. Sophie went back to her drawing. Claire watched her daughter's careful, concentrated work and felt a wave of gratitude so strong it was almost painful. Not just for Ethan or whoever had been orchestrating the changes in their life, but for this moment. For the fact that Sophie could sit here doing homework instead of going to bed hungry. For the fact that Claire didn't have to work a double shift tomorrow. For the simple, impossible gift of stability. The next day at the diner, a man in an expensive suit came in during the lunch rush. Claire's heart jumped before she realized it wasn't Ethan. Wrong build, wrong face, wrong everything. He sat in her section and ordered coffee and a BLT. "You're the new manager, right?" he said when Claire brought his order. "Claire?" "Assistant manager. Can I help you with something?" "David Chen. I'm with Callaway Technologies." He pulled out a business card and set it on the table. "I was hoping we could talk." Claire's hands went cold. "I'm working." "I can wait until your shift ends, or we could schedule something. This is important." "I didn't ask for anything," Claire said, her voice low and tight. "I don't know what you think is happening here, but—" "Ms. Dawson." David's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm not here to take anything away or to make demands. I'm here because my boss, my friend, did something impulsive 6 months ago and hasn't been able to stop thinking about it since. And I'm worried about him." Claire glanced around the diner. Her coworker Lisa was watching from behind the counter, curious but not intervening yet. "End of my shift is at 4, Claire said. "There's a coffee shop 2 blocks east. I'll meet you there." David nodded. "Thank you." Claire spent the rest of her shift in a state of controlled panic. Her hand shook when she poured coffee. She messed up 2 orders. Lisa asked if she was okay and Claire lied and said she was fine. At 4:15, she walked into the coffee shop and found David sitting at a corner table with 2 cups already ordered. "I got you a latte," he said as she sat down. "Hope that's okay." "What do you want?" Claire didn't touch the coffee. "Ethan doesn't know I'm here. If he found out, he'd probably fire me." David smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "He's been my best friend since college. I've watched him build an empire, get married, lose his wife, and spend 4 years basically sleepwalking through life. Then one night in December, he comes back from a walk talking about birthday cakes and little girls and purpose." Claire said nothing. "He started changing things, not big, flashy charity stuff, quiet things, individual interventions, your job, your rent, your daughter's programs, and don't bother denying it, I know, because I helped arrange some of it." David leaned forward. "Here's what you need to understand. Ethan has more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. But after his wife died, none of it meant anything to him. Work was just something to fill the hours." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because for the first time in 4 years, he seems like he gives a damn about something. And I think it might be because of you and your daughter." David paused. "I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm not suggesting you owe him anything. I just thought you should know that whatever happened that night, it mattered to him too." Claire finally picked up the latte just to have something to do with her hands. "He shouldn't have interfered in my life." "Probably not, but he did." And I'm guessing things are better now than they were 6 months ago? Claire wanted to be angry, wanted to feel violated or manipulated or indignant, but mostly she just felt tired and confused and still grateful despite everything. Why didn't he just tell me? She asked. Why all the secret help? Because if he'd walked up to you and said, "Hi, I'm a billionaire and I want to change your life," what would you have said? I would have told him to go to hell. Exactly, David smiled. So he did it quietly, made it look like luck, or coincidence, or bureaucratic error. Gave you the help without taking away your dignity. Claire stared into her coffee. I still should have had a choice. You're right, you should have. David stood up, leaving his own coffee untouched. For what it's worth, I don't think Ethan really understood what he was doing. He just saw someone hurting and tried to fix it the only way he knew how. He paused at the door. He's not a bad guy, Ms. Dawson. He's just a very lonely man with too much money and no idea what to do with it. After David left, Claire sat alone in the coffee shop for a long time. She thought about the past 6 months, the job, the apartment repairs, Sophie's opportunities, all the doors that had suddenly opened after years of being slammed in her face. She thought about Ethan sitting in her apartment, eating birthday cake and talking to Sophie about computers and asking her about hot chocolate like it was the most important question in the world. She thought about what Sophie had said. I think he needed the thank you more than we needed the cake. Claire pulled out her phone and looked at David Chen's business card. There was a personal cell number written on the back. She typed out a message. Tell him thank you, and tell him he's not as subtle as he thinks he is. The response came 30 seconds later. I'll pass that along. For what it's worth, I think you might have saved his life that night. He just happened to change yours, too. Claire walked home through streets that felt different now, charged with possibility. Sophie was at her after-school program, wouldn't be home for another hour. Claire had time to think, to process, to figure out what she felt about all of this. Angry? Yes. Grateful? Also yes. Confused? Absolutely. But underneath it all was something else, a strange kind of understanding. She'd spent 6 years doing everything she could to give Sophie a better life, working herself to exhaustion, sacrificing everything, fighting every single day. And here was someone who'd looked at her struggle and decided to shoulder some of that weight without being asked. It should have felt condescending, should have felt like pity, but it didn't. It felt like someone had finally seen her, really seen her, not as a charity case or a problem to solve, but as a person who deserved better than what life had handed her. That evening, after Sophie went to bed, Claire sat down and wrote an email to the general contact address for Callaway Technologies. She wrote it and deleted it 3 times before finally sending a version that felt honest. Mr. Callaway, I know what you did. I know about the job and the rent and all of it. I should probably be angry, and part of me is. You made decisions about my life without my permission, but I'm also writing to say thank you, not for the money or the opportunities, though those matter, but for seeing us, for noticing a little girl who tried not to cry and for doing something about it. Sophie asks about you sometimes. She says you looked lonely. I think maybe she was right. If you ever want to stop by for cake and bad hot chocolate again, you know where we live. No strings, no expectations, just an invitation. She hit send before she could change her mind. The response came 3 days later. Not an email, but a handwritten note delivered to the diner by courier. Claire opened it during her break, her hand shaking slightly. Dear Claire, I'm sorry for overstepping. I'm sorry for not being honest. I'm not very good at this, at connecting with people, at knowing what's appropriate, at being anything other than the guy who writes checks to solve problems. Your daughter is right. I am lonely. Have been for a long time. That night at your apartment was the first time in years I felt like maybe I could be human again instead of just successful. I'd like to take you up on that invitation, if the offer still stands. Fair warning, I'm terrible at small talk, and I'll probably be awkward as hell. But I make a mean scrambled eggs, if Sophie's interested. Ethan. Claire read the note 5 times. Then she pulled out her phone and texted the number David had given her. Sunday afternoon, 3 o'clock. And bring ingredients for those eggs. Sophie's picky. The response was immediate. I'll be there. Sunday came too fast and not fast enough. Claire changed her shirt 3 times before settling on the first one she'd tried on, then immediately second-guessed that decision. Sophie watched from the doorway of Claire's bedroom with the kind of knowing smirk that 6-year-olds shouldn't be capable of. You look pretty, Mama. I'm not trying to look pretty. I'm just... Claire stopped, caught her reflection in the mirror, and sighed. Okay, maybe a little. Is Mr. Ethan your boyfriend now? No, absolutely not. He's just a friend, maybe. I don't know what he is. Claire ran her hands through her hair, which refused to cooperate. Sophie, this is complicated. You say everything is complicated. Because everything is complicated. The knock came at exactly 3 o'clock. Of course it did. Billionaires probably had internal clocks that ran on Swiss precision. Claire opened the door to find Ethan standing in the hallway holding 2 grocery bags and looking exactly as uncomfortable as his note had promised. He'd dressed down, jeans, a plain sweater, regular shoes instead of the Italian leather ones, but he still somehow managed to look like he'd walked off the pages of a magazine. Some people just had that quality, Claire thought, like they were slightly more in focus than the rest of the world. Hi, he said. I brought eggs. And also cheese, because I figured scrambled eggs without cheese is basically a crime. And orange juice, the good kind with pulp, and bread for toast, and I may have panicked in the grocery store and bought way too much stuff. Claire couldn't help it. She laughed. You look terrified. I am terrified. Ethan's smile was shaky. I run a $4 billion company, and right now I'm more nervous than I've been in any board meeting ever. Mr. Ethan! Sophie came barreling around the corner and wrapped herself around his legs before Claire could stop her. You came back! I did. Ethan looked down at Sophie with an expression that made Claire's chest hurt. I promised scrambled eggs, didn't I? They moved into the kitchen, which suddenly felt much smaller with Ethan in it. He unpacked the grocery bags with the careful precision of someone who didn't cook often but had watched enough cooking shows to fake competence. Claire noticed his hands were shaking slightly. You really are nervous, she said quietly, while Sophie rummaged through the bags. Terrified, Ethan repeated. I haven't done this in years, just normal Sunday afternoon stuff. With people. We're not going to bite. I know. It's not you I'm worried about. It's me. He cracked an egg into a bowl with more force than necessary, and a piece of shell went with it. See? I'm already screwing it up. It's just eggshell. Claire reached over and fished it out. Relax. But Ethan didn't relax. He moved around her tiny kitchen like someone walking through a minefield, hyper-aware of every movement, every word. He burned the first batch of eggs, oversalted the second, and finally produced a third batch that was merely okay. Sophie ate them like they were the best thing she'd ever tasted. These are so good! They're mediocre at best, Ethan said, but he looked pleased anyway. They sat around the small table, the same table where they'd eaten birthday cake 6 months ago, and for a while nobody knew what to say. The silence stretched out, awkward and heavy, until Sophie filled it the way kids always did. Mama knows you helped us, she announced. She tried to hide the magazine, but I saw it. You're really rich. Sophie! Claire's face went hot. It's okay. Ethan set down his fork. Yeah, I'm really rich. Does that bother you? Sophie considered this seriously. No, but Mama says we're not supposed to take things from people just because they have money. Your mom's right. You shouldn't. Ethan looked at Claire, then back at Sophie. But sometimes when people have more than they need, it's okay to share. Especially with people you care about. Do you care about us? Sophie asked with the blunt directness of childhood. The question hung in the air. Claire held her breath. Yeah, Ethan said finally. I do. I know that probably sounds weird since we barely know each other, but yeah, I care about you guys. Sophie seemed satisfied with this answer and went back to her eggs. Claire felt like she might stop breathing. After they ate, Sophie dragged Ethan over to see her drawings, dozens of them, taped to the walls of the small space that served as her bedroom. He studied each one with the same intensity he probably gave quarterly earnings reports, asking questions about colors and subjects and techniques. This one's our building, Sophie explained, pointing to a drawing of a tall rectangle with windows. And this is the stray cat, Princess. And this one's you. The drawing of Ethan showed a stick figure with dark hair standing in front of what looked like the bakery window. He was smiling, but Sophie had drawn tears on his face. Why am I crying? Ethan asked, his voice careful. Because you were sad, even when you smiled. Sophie touched the drawing gently. Are you still sad? Claire started to intervene. Sophie, that's too personal. But Ethan held up a hand. Sometimes, he said honestly. Less than I used to be, though. Because of us? Yeah, because of you. Sophie hugged him again, fierce and sudden, and this time Ethan hugged back. Claire turned away, blinking hard, pretending to be very interested in cleaning up the kitchen. When Sophie finally ran off to play with her toys, Ethan joined Claire at the sink. They washed dishes in silence for a while, finding a rhythm that felt startlingly domestic. I should apologize, Ethan said finally, for the job, the rent, all of it. I had no right to interfere in your life like that. No, you didn't. Claire handed him a plate to dry. But I'm not going to pretend I'm not grateful. Do you know what it's like to spend 6 years drowning? And then suddenly, for the first time ever, to feel like maybe you might actually be okay? I can imagine. Can you? The words came out sharper than Claire intended. Because from where I'm standing, you've never had to choose between feeding your kid and paying rent. You've never had to tell your daughter she can't have a birthday cake because you're $40 short this month. You've never had to... She stopped, realizing she was crying. Ethan set down the dish towel and just stood there, looking helpless and sorry and entirely out of his depth. You're right, he said quietly. I can't imagine. I can remember what it was like when I was a kid, watching my mom struggle. But as an adult? No. I built my company and made my money, and after that I never had to worry about anything except how to spend it. Claire wiped her eyes roughly. I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I know, but you should. What I did was arrogant. I saw a problem and threw money at it without considering how you might feel about it. That's what I do. It's all I know how to do anymore. Why? Claire turned to face him fully. Why us? You could help thousands of people. Probably do, through your foundation or whatever. So why did you fixate on me and Sophie? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Because when I looked at Sophie that night, I saw every kid whose birthday my mom couldn't afford to celebrate. And when I looked at you, I saw my mom working yourself to death, trying so hard to give your kid everything, knowing it would never be enough. He met her eyes. And for the first time in 4 years, I felt something other than numb. It hurt like hell, but at least it was something. The honesty of it hit Claire like a physical blow. She'd expected excuses or platitudes or wealthy person guilt, not this raw admission that her pain had somehow made him feel human again. That's really messed up, she said. I know. You basically used our suffering to make yourself feel better. I know that too. And you did it all behind my back, didn't even give me a choice. Claire, Ethan's voice was firm. I know it was wrong. I know I should have talked to you first, should have been honest, should have done 1,000 things differently. But I didn't, and I can't take it back. So what do you want from me now? An apology? You have it. You want me to reverse everything, take back the job and the rent credit and all of it? I will. Just tell me what you want. What did she want? Claire had been asking herself that question for 6 months and still didn't have an answer. She was angry, yes, felt violated and manipulated and reduced to a charity case. But she was also standing in an apartment that didn't leak when it rained, working a job with health insurance, watching her daughter thrive in programs she could never have afforded. I want you to be honest with me, she said finally. No more secret interventions, no more mysterious scholarships or convenient billionaires. If you want to be part of our lives, you do it like a normal person. You show up, you talk to me, you ask before you do things. I can do that. And I want to know why, really why, not the stuff about your mom or feeling numb. I want to know what you actually get out of this. Ethan leaned against the counter, his shoulders slumping. You want the truth? I don't know. Maybe I'm trying to build some kind of surrogate family because I don't know how to have a real one anymore. Maybe I'm trying to prove to myself that my money can actually matter. Maybe I just really liked your daughter's smile and wanted to see it again. He laughed, but it sounded bitter. Or maybe I'm just a lonely, but a messed up guy who latched on to the first thing that made him feel something in 4 years. Take your pick. All of the above, Claire said. I think it's all of the above. Probably. They went back to washing dishes. Sophie's laughter drifted in from the other room. She was doing voices for her stuffed animals, creating some elaborate imaginary scenario. The sound felt like light in the small apartment. I still don't know what this is, Claire said. Between us, this, whatever it is. Neither do I. But I think maybe I'd like to figure it out, if you're willing to do it the normal way. No more puppet mastering my life from behind the scenes. The normal way, Ethan repeated. I'm not sure I remember what that is. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. Over the following months, they did figure it out, though not smoothly and not without setbacks. Ethan started coming by on Sunday afternoons. Sometimes he brought ingredients for increasingly elaborate meals. His cooking improved with practice, though he never quite mastered Claire's ancient, temperamental oven. Sometimes he and Sophie would work on art projects while Claire caught up on paperwork from the diner. Sometimes they'd all just watch movies together. Sophie wedged between them on the couch, arguing about whether animated films counted as real cinema. They're just cartoons, Ethan said once. Sophie looked at him like he'd insulted her entire family. They're art. She's right, Claire said, unable to hide her smile. Respect the art. But it wasn't all easy. There were moments when the gap between their worlds felt impossible to bridge. Like when Ethan casually mentioned a business trip to Singapore and Sophie asked if they could come too, and Claire had to explain that some people couldn't just fly across the world on a whim. Or when Ethan's phone would ring during dinner and he'd take calls about million-dollar deals, while Claire tried not to think about how her annual salary wouldn't cover his monthly dry cleaning bill. The first real fight came 3 months into whatever they were doing. Ethan showed up with tickets to a Broadway show. Good seats, the kind that cost hundreds of dollars each. I thought Sophie might like it, he said, holding out the tickets. It's that new musical about the girl who builds robots. Sophie's eyes went huge. Really? Mama, can we go? Claire took the tickets, looked at the date and seat numbers, and handed them back. We can't accept these. Why not? Ethan looked genuinely confused. She'd love it. Because those seats cost more than I make in a week. Because you can't just throw money at everything. Because... Claire stopped, aware that Sophie was watching. Sophie, go play in your room for a minute, okay? Once Sophie was gone, Claire turned back to Ethan. We talked about this. No more secret help, no more just doing things without asking. I wasn't being secret. I'm literally standing here with the tickets. You're buying my daughter presents that cost hundreds of dollars without even asking if it's appropriate. It's a show, not a car. To you, it's just a show. To me, it's a week's salary. Don't you see how that feels? Claire's voice was rising despite her efforts to keep it down. Every time you do something like this, you remind me that we're not equals, that you're the rich guy helping out the poor single mom and her kid. Ethan's face went hard. That's not what this is, isn't it? Be honest. Would you even look at someone like me if you hadn't felt sorry for us that night? The question hung between them, cruel and necessary. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I don't know, he said finally. Maybe not. Does that mean what we have now doesn't matter? It means I need to know this is real, not just you trying to fix something broken because it makes you feel better about yourself. You're not broken, Claire. I know I'm not, but sometimes I think you don't. Claire took a breath. Look, I like having you around. Sophie adores you, but I can't do this if every interaction is going to remind me of how much more you have than we do. I need us to be on equal ground somehow. How? Tell me how and I'll do it. Claire thought about it. You want to take Sophie to a show? Great. But we plan it together and I pay for my own ticket. That's ridiculous. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I don't care. This is important to me. Claire held his gaze. I need to contribute. I need to feel like I'm not just along for the ride in your charity project. Ethan looked like he wanted to argue more, but something in Claire's expression stopped him. Okay, fine. You pay for your ticket. Thank you, but I'm still buying Sophie's. And before you argue, she's 6. 6-year-olds don't have income. Someone has to buy her ticket, and I'd like it to be me. Claire wanted to argue, but couldn't find the logic to support it. Fine. They went to the show 2 weeks later. Claire insisted on paying for her own ticket and contributed to dinner afterward, even though it nearly wiped out what she'd been saving for Sophie's new winter coat. It was worth it to feel like she was participating rather than accepting handouts. Sophie talked about the show for weeks. She started building robots out of cardboard boxes and duct tape, filling the apartment with elaborate creations that were as much hazard as art. Ethan helped her, the two of them spending hours huddled over plans and prototypes, and Claire would watch them and feel her heart do complicated things. It was during one of these robot building sessions that Sophie asked the question Claire had been dreading. "Are you going to marry my mama?" Ethan nearly dropped the cardboard tube he was holding. Claire, who'd been washing dishes in the kitchen, froze. "Sophie, that's not—" Claire started. "Because I think you should," Sophie continued, oblivious to the tension she'd just created. "Then you could live here and we could build robots all the time and you wouldn't be lonely anymore." Ethan looked at Claire. Claire looked at Ethan. Neither of them seemed to know what to say. "Marriage is complicated, kiddo," Ethan said finally. "It's not something you just do because you like spending time together." "Why not?" "Because—" Ethan trailed off, clearly out of his depth. "Claire, help me out here." Claire came over and sat down on the floor next to Sophie. "Because grown-ups need time to figure out what they want. Mr. Ethan and I are still getting to know each other." "But you like him, right?" "Yes, I like him." "And he likes you?" "I like her very much," Ethan said quietly. Sophie looked between them like they were being deliberately obtuse. "So, what's the problem?" After Sophie went to bed that night, Claire and Ethan sat on the couch in the kind of heavy silence that comes after important questions get asked by 6-year-olds who don't understand how complicated the world is. "Sorry about that," Claire said. "She's been watching too many Disney movies." "It's okay." Ethan was staring at his hands. "She's not wrong, though. I do like you. A lot." Claire's heart kicked hard against her ribs. "Ethan, I know the timing is terrible. I know we're still figuring out what this is. I know I come with a ridiculous amount of baggage and money and complications." He finally looked at her. "But somewhere between the scrambled eggs and the robot building and the arguments about movie tickets, I started feeling things I haven't felt since Anna died, and it scares the hell out of me." Anna. It was the first time he'd said his wife's name in front of Claire. The weight of it settled between them like a third person on the couch. "I can't be her," Claire said quietly. "I can't replace what you lost." "I'm not asking you to. She was everything I thought I wanted. Smart, ambitious, from the right family, fit perfectly into my world." Ethan's voice was rough. "But she's gone. And for 4 years I tried to stay loyal to a ghost, and all it did was make me empty. Then I saw you through a bakery window and something cracked open inside me. I don't want to replace Anna. I want to figure out how to be alive again, and I think maybe you're part of that." Claire didn't know what to say. She'd been so focused on the practical complications, the money difference, the power imbalance, the impossibility of their worlds ever really aligning, that she hadn't let herself think about the emotional reality, that she liked this broken billionaire who burned scrambled eggs and built cardboard robots and looked at her daughter like she hung the moon. "I'm scared too," she admitted. "I've spent 6 years being Sophie's mom and nothing else. I don't know how to be anything more than that. And the idea of letting someone in, especially someone like you, someone who could hurt us so badly if this goes wrong—" She shook her head. "It terrifies me." "So we're both terrified." Apparently. They sat there for a while, not touching, just existing in the same space. Then Ethan reached over and took her hand. His palm was warm, slightly calloused from the robot building. Claire didn't pull away. "We don't have to figure everything out tonight," Ethan said. "We can just keep doing what we're doing. Sunday afternoons and bad cooking and cardboard robots, see where it goes. No more secret interventions? No more secret interventions, I promise." It was a promise he kept mostly. There was one incident 2 months later when Sophie got sick, just a bad flu, but it scared Claire badly after the pneumonia scare from the previous year. Ethan showed up at the emergency room somehow, though Claire hadn't called him, and she was too worried and exhausted to be angry about it. "David texted me," Ethan explained, sitting down next to her in the waiting room. "He has some kind of alert set up for when your name comes through hospital systems. Don't ask me how, it's probably illegal." Claire should have been furious about the privacy violation. Instead, she just leaned against his shoulder and let herself take comfort from his presence. Sophie was fine. The doctor prescribed rest and fluids and sent them home with instructions to return if her fever spiked. Ethan drove them back to the apartment, carried a sleeping Sophie up 4 flights of stairs, and tucked her into bed with a gentleness that made Claire's throat tight. "Thank you," she said when they were back in the living room. You don't have to thank me for caring about her, about both of you. I know, but I'm going to anyway. Ethan pulled her into a hug. They'd hugged before, quick, friendly embraces when he arrived or left. But this was different, slower, more deliberate. Claire let herself sink into it, breathing in the expensive cologne that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget and not caring. When they pulled apart, Ethan's hand lingered on her cheek. I want to kiss you. Okay. Okay? I mean, if you're going to announce it like that, you kind of have to follow through. He kissed her. It was soft and careful and a little clumsy, like they were both out of practice at this, which they were. Claire hadn't kissed anyone since Sophie's father left 7 years ago. Ethan hadn't kissed anyone since Anna died 4 years ago. They were two people trying to remember how to be vulnerable, how to want something beyond survival or success. When they broke apart, Claire was crying. Not sad tears, just overwhelmed ones. Was that okay? Ethan asked, looking worried. Yeah. Claire laughed wetly. Yeah, that was okay. They didn't sleep together that night. Ethan went home to his penthouse, and Claire checked on Sophie 3 times before finally falling asleep on the couch, too wired to make it to her own bed. But something had shifted. Some line had been crossed that they couldn't uncross. The next Sunday, Ethan showed up with flowers. Just a simple bouquet from the bodega down the street, nothing fancy, and that somehow made it perfect. I Googled how to date someone, he admitted. Apparently flowers are still a thing. They are. Claire took the bouquet, buried her nose in the blooms. Though I should warn you, I have no idea how to do this either, the dating thing. It's been a long time. We'll figure it out together, like everything else. And they did, slowly and imperfectly, and with a lot of mistakes along the way. They went on actual dates, dinner at places where Claire didn't have to check the prices twice, movies, walks through parks. Ethan learned to ask before planning things, and Claire learned to accept help without feeling like she was losing pieces of herself. They argued about money and time and what Sophie should or shouldn't be exposed to. They had moments of profound understanding and moments where they might as well have been speaking different languages. But they kept showing up. That was the thing. Every Sunday afternoon, and then Wednesday evenings too, and then spontaneous Tuesday lunches when Ethan's schedule allowed. He became part of the rhythm of their lives, and slowly, carefully, Claire let herself believe that maybe this could actually work. Sophie, for her part, was thrilled. She started calling Ethan her best friend, which made him look simultaneously proud and terrified of the responsibility. They had inside jokes about robots and engineering that Claire didn't fully understand. Ethan showed up to Sophie's school events, art shows and science fairs, and the winter concert where Sophie forgot half her lines but smiled the entire time. A year after that first Sunday afternoon with scrambled eggs, Claire woke up and realized she was in love with him. The thought hit her while she was making coffee, mundane and ordinary, and it scared her so badly she almost dropped the pot. She was in love with a billionaire, with someone whose world was so different from hers they might as well be from different planets, with someone who could hurt her and Sophie so badly if this fell apart. But she was also in love with the man who burned breakfast and built robots and showed up when Sophie was sick without being asked. The man who was learning to be human again after 4 years of sleepwalking through his life. The man who looked at her like she was something precious instead of something to be fixed. Claire didn't tell him. Not yet. She needed to sit with the feeling for a while, make sure it was real and not just gratitude or loneliness or the temptation of an easier life. But she held it close, this dangerous, terrifying, wonderful knowledge that she'd fallen in love with the stranger who'd bought her daughter a birthday cake and somehow become essential to both their lives. That realization sat heavy in Claire's chest for 3 weeks before the universe decided to test exactly how much she could handle. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon, right in the middle of the lunch rush at the diner. Claire Dawson. The voice was professional, female, unfamiliar. This is Margaret Chen from Preston Academy. We received Sophie's application for our junior scholarship program, and we'd love to schedule an interview. Claire stepped into the storage room, her heart already sinking. I'm sorry, there must be a mistake. I didn't apply to any academy. A pause on the other end. The application came through our standard channels. It listed you as the primary guardian and included all of Sophie's academic records, teacher recommendations, and a personal essay. I didn't submit anything. Claire's voice came out harder than she intended. Who actually filed the application? Another pause, longer this time. I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics of application processes, but I can tell you that Preston Academy is one of the top preparatory schools in the state. We rarely extend interview invitations, and Sophie's application was exceptionally strong. The scholarship would cover full tuition, books, and extracurricular activities. Claire closed her eyes. Let me call you back. She hung up and immediately dialed Ethan. He answered on the second ring, sounding distracted. Hey, I'm in a meeting. Can I call you back in? Did you apply Sophie to a private school? Silence. Then a muffled sound like Ethan was covering the phone. When he came back, his voice was quieter. Can we talk about this later? Did you or didn't you? I may have forwarded some of her school records to a contact who mentioned they were looking for talented students. That's all. That's all? Ethan, you went behind my back and applied my daughter to a school without asking me. I didn't apply her. I just made sure the school knew she existed. They made their own decision to, You promised. You promised no more secret interventions. She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. When he spoke again, his voice was tight. You're right. I'm sorry. I just thought, I have to get back to work. Claire hung up before he could finish. She made it through to the rest of her shift on autopilot, smiling at customers and taking orders and pretending her hands weren't shaking. The Preston Academy woman had left a voicemail with a callback number. Claire stared at it for 10 minutes before finally looking up the school on her phone. The website was everything she'd expected. Sprawling campus, state-of-the-art facilities, college acceptance rates in the high 90s. The kind of school that opened doors Claire hadn't even known existed. The kind of school that would give Sophie opportunities that Claire's daughter would never have access to otherwise. The kind of school that Ethan's money had just bought access to, whether Claire wanted it or not. That evening, Sophie was full of chatter about her day. A science experiment with vinegar and baking soda, a new girl in class who liked robots too, the stray cat princess who'd let Sophie pet her for the first time. Claire made dinner and helped with homework and tucked Sophie into bed, all while feeling like she was moving through water. Ethan showed up at 8:30. Claire had been expecting him, had left the door unlocked so he wouldn't have to knock and risk waking Sophie. He let himself in quietly, looking exhausted and defensive and sorry all at once. Before you say anything, he started, I know I screwed up. I know I promised not to do exactly this kind of thing, and I know you're angry. I'm past angry, Ethan. I'm tired. Claire stayed where she was, sitting at the kitchen table. Do you understand what you did? You made a decision about my daughter's education without consulting me, her mother. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you think your money gives you the right to make choices about our lives. Ethan flinched. That's not fair, isn't it? You saw a school you thought was good, and you decided Sophie should go there, and you made it happen. You didn't ask if I wanted her in private school. You didn't ask if I was comfortable with her being around kids from families with money. You just decided. Because you would have said no. The words came out sharp. You would have said no because of your pride, and Sophie would have missed out on an incredible opportunity because you can't accept help. The accusation hung between them like a slap. Claire stood up slowly. Get out. Claire, I said get out right now. Can we please just talk about this like adults? I am talking like an adult who's telling you to leave my apartment before I say something I can't take back. Claire's voice was shaking. You don't get to come into my home and tell me that my pride is hurting my daughter. You don't get to act like you know what's best for her better than I do. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. That's exactly what you meant. Claire moved to the door and opened it. Please go. Ethan stood there for a long moment, looking like he wanted to argue more. Then his shoulders slumped and he walked to the door. He paused in the doorway. For what it's worth, I really am sorry. I thought I was helping. You thought you were fixing. There's a difference. After he left, Claire sat on her couch and let herself cry. Not loud, heaving sobs that might wake Sophie, just quiet tears that ran down her face while she stared at nothing. She cried for the relationship that was probably over before it had really begun. She cried for Sophie, who was going to be heartbroken when Ethan stopped coming around. And she cried for herself, because somewhere in the past year she'd let herself believe that maybe she could have this, could have love and partnership and someone who saw her as an equal. Her phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. I'm sorry. I'll back out of the school thing. Tell them it was a mistake. Claire typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, don't. I'll call them tomorrow and handle it myself. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat at her laptop and researched Preston Academy until her eyes burned. Read parent reviews and college acceptance statistics and financial breakdowns. Looked at photos of smiling students in uniform, state-of-the-art science labs, art studios that probably cost more than Claire's annual salary. By 3 in the morning, she'd made a decision she hated. The next day, Claire called Preston Academy back and scheduled the interview. Then she called Ethan. "We need to talk," she said when he answered. "Are you free this evening?" "I'll make myself free." They met at a coffee shop halfway between the diner and his office. Neutral ground. Ethan looked like he hadn't slept either, his tie loosened and dark circles under his eyes. "I scheduled Sophie's interview," Claire said before he could speak. "It's next Thursday at 4. Ethan's expression was carefully neutral. "Okay. I'm not doing it because of you. I'm doing it because I spent all night researching that school, and it's the kind of opportunity that could change Sophie's entire life. The kind I'd be a bad mother to refuse just because of my pride." Claire's hands were tight around her coffee cup. "But I need you to understand something. This doesn't mean what you did was okay. It doesn't mean I forgive you for going behind my back. It just means I'm putting Sophie first, the way I always have. I understand." "Do you? Because I don't think you do." Claire leaned forward. "You keep treating me like a problem to solve. Like if you just throw enough money and opportunities at me, everything will be fixed and perfect. But I'm not broken, Ethan. My life isn't something that needs to be repaired." "I know that." "Then why do you keep trying to fix it?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. "Because fixing things is all I know how to do. I built a company by seeing problems and solving them. I made billions by being the guy who could make things work better. And when Anna died, I couldn't fix that. Couldn't make it better or solve it or do anything except watch her slip away." He looked down at his hands. "So when I saw you and Sophie struggling, when I saw problems I actually could solve, I couldn't help myself. And I know that's messed up. I know it's not fair to you, but I don't know how to care about people without trying to save them." The honesty of it gutted Claire. She wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to her righteous indignation about privacy and autonomy and all the ways he'd overstepped. But she also understood what he was telling her, that his need to help wasn't about pity or condescension. It was about control, about doing something, anything, to make the world feel less random and cruel. "You can't save me," Claire said quietly. "I don't need saving. I need a partner, someone who respects me enough to let me make my own choices, even when those choices are hard or scary or might not be what you choose. I want to be that person. I'm just not sure I know how." "Then learn, or we're done." The words hung heavy between them. Ethan nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "Okay, I'll learn." They didn't resolve everything that day. Couldn't. But they agreed to try. Ethan promised, again, to stop making decisions about Claire and Sophie's lives without consulting her first. Claire promised to actually consider his input instead of automatically rejecting anything that felt like charity. "I'm probably going to mess up again," Ethan warned. "Old habits and all that." "I know. But if you do, I need you to own it. Don't make excuses or try to justify it. Just admit you screwed up and do better next time." "I can do that." Sophie's interview at Preston Academy was both better and worse than Claire had imagined. Better because Sophie was brilliant and charming and won over the admissions director in about 5 minutes. Worse because walking through those halls, seeing the resources and opportunities, made Claire acutely aware of everything she couldn't give her daughter on her own. "What did you think?" Claire asked Sophie afterward as they walked to the bus stop. "It was really cool. They have a robotics lab and a 3D printer and a teacher who used to work at NASA." Sophie swung their joined hands. "But I'd miss my friends. And what about Mr. Ethan? Would I still get to see him?" Claire's chest tightened. "Of course you would. He's part of our lives. That doesn't change just because you go to a different school." If Sophie went to Preston, if Claire could actually let her daughter enter a world where Claire herself would never fully belong. The acceptance letter came 2 weeks later. Full scholarship, just as promised. The letter praised Sophie's academic achievements, her creativity, her potential. It included information about the next steps, uniform requirements, supply lists. Claire read it 3 times, then put it on the refrigerator next to Sophie's artwork. She stared at it while making dinner, while helping with homework, while trying to figure out what the right choice was. That Sunday, Ethan showed up for their usual afternoon together. Things had been tentative between them since the fight, polite but distant, like they were both afraid of saying the wrong thing. He brought groceries for a new recipe he wanted to try, some kind of pasta dish that was probably beyond his skill level. She got in, Claire said, while Ethan was unpacking ingredients. His hands stilled. Yeah? Full scholarship. They want her to start in the fall. That's great, Claire. Really great. Is it? Claire leaned against the counter. Because I've spent 2 weeks trying to figure out if I'm doing the right thing. If I'm sending my daughter to a school where she'll be surrounded by kids whose parents have summer homes and trust funds, where she'll learn that the world I can give her isn't enough. Ethan set down the box of pasta he'd been holding. Sophie's smart enough to know that money isn't what makes a good life. You've already taught her that. Have I? Or have I just taught her to settle for less because that's all we have? Claire, I see the way you look sometimes. At our apartment, at my job, at the life I've built. And I know you're trying to hide it, but I can see you thinking about how you could make it all better. Bigger apartment, better job, private school for Sophie. Like the life I've given her isn't good enough. That's not what I think. Isn't it? Ethan crossed the space between them and took her hands. You want to know what I actually think when I look at your life? I think you're the strongest person I've ever met. I think you've built something real and meaningful out of circumstances that would have broken most people. I think your daughter is kind and smart and creative because of how you raised her, not despite it. He paused. And yeah, I think about ways I could help, because that's what you do when you care about someone. You want to make their life easier. But that doesn't mean I think your life is less valuable than mine. Claire wanted to believe him, wanted to accept the words at face value and move forward, but there was still something nagging at her, some fundamental inequality in their relationship that she couldn't shake. Sophie asked me something yesterday, she said quietly. She asked if we were poor. What did you tell her? I told her we had everything we needed, that some people have more money, but that doesn't make them better or happier. Claire pulled her hands away. Then she asked if that's why you're always buying things for us. Because we're poor and you're rich. Ethan's face went carefully blank. What did you say to that? I said you buy things because you care about us, because you want to share what you have. But honestly, I don't know if that's true anymore. I don't know if you'd even look at me if I wasn't someone you could help. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Ethan. That's kind of the whole point. Claire felt tears building but refused to let them fall. I've spent my whole adult life fighting to be seen as more than my circumstances, more than the poor single mom who couldn't afford to finish college. And then you came along, and for a while I thought maybe you did see me that way. But every time you make decisions for me, every time you solve my problems without asking, you're telling me that you don't actually trust me to handle my own life. I do trust you. Then prove it. Let me make the decision about Sophie's school without trying to influence it. Let me figure out how to pay for her uniform and supplies on my own. Let me be an equal partner in this relationship instead of someone you're trying to save. The challenge hung between them. Ethan looked like he wanted to argue, to explain, to make promises he might not be able to keep. Instead, he just nodded. Okay, I won't say anything about the school. I won't offer to help with costs. You make the call, whatever it is, and I'll support it. Even if I decide she shouldn't go. Even then, Claire searched his face for signs that he was just saying what she wanted to hear, but he looked sincere, if pained. Thank you, she said. They made pasta together, working in the kind of careful silence that comes after difficult conversations. Sophie came home from her friend's house and helped set the table, chattering about a project she wanted to build. Ethan listened and asked questions and didn't once mention Preston Academy or scholarships or anything related to money. After dinner, after Sophie went to bed, Ethan helped Claire clean up. They moved around each other with the ease of long practice, finding rhythms in the mundane tasks of dishes and wiping counters. I meant what I said earlier, Ethan said as he dried the last plate, about you being the strongest person I know. I don't feel strong. I feel terrified most of the time. Strength isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite it. He set the plate down. You do that every single day. Claire turned to face him fully. I'm scared of losing you. Of Sophie losing you. She loves you, you know. Talks about you constantly when you're not here. And I'm scared that if I keep pushing back, keep insisting on equality and boundaries, you'll decide it's too much work. I'm not going anywhere. You say that now. But what happens when you realize that being with me means actually being equals? That you can't just swoop in and fix everything? What happens when it's not a fun project anymore but actual work? Ethan pulled her close, his arms solid around her. Then it's work. I'm not afraid of work, Claire. I built a billion-dollar company from nothing. I think I can handle a relationship that requires actual effort. Billion with a B? 4 billion, actually, but who's counting? Claire laughed despite herself, the sound muffled against his chest. You're ridiculous. I prefer charmingly wealthy. Definitely ridiculous. They stood like that for a while, just holding each other in the small kitchen while the city hummed outside. Claire let herself have this moment of peace before the hard decisions that were coming, before she had to figure out whether to send her daughter to a school that might give her everything Claire couldn't, before she had to navigate a relationship with someone whose world was so different from hers that sometimes it felt like they were speaking different languages. I love you, Ethan said quietly. I should have said it before now. Should have told you weeks ago. But I love you, Claire, and Sophie, and this ridiculous apartment with the heater that barely works. I love all of it. Claire's breath caught. She'd known, somewhere deep down, but hearing the words made it real in a way that terrified her. I love you too, she whispered, and that scares me more than anything. Why? Because love makes you vulnerable, makes you care about someone enough that losing them could destroy you. I've been there before with Sophie's father, and I swore I'd never let anyone have that power over me again. I'm not him. I know, but that doesn't make it less scary. Ethan pulled back enough to look at her face. So we're both terrified. Seems like a good foundation for a relationship. Is that what this is? A relationship? I hope so. Unless you've been kissing me and saying you love me for purely philanthropic reasons. Claire smiled despite the tears that were finally falling. You're really bad at this, you know, the whole romance thing. I know, but I'm trying to get better. Try harder. Yes, ma'am. They kissed there in the kitchen, surrounded by clean dishes and the smell of pasta sauce and all the ordinary debris of a shared life. It wasn't cinematic or perfect. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket 3 times before he finally turned it off. Claire's back ached from standing at the stove. The moment was messy and human and real. Exactly what both of them needed. The decision about Preston Academy came 2 days later, not through some grand revelation, but through a simple conversation with Sophie. Do you want to go to the new school? Claire asked while they were eating breakfast. Sophie considered this seriously, the way she approached everything. I think so, but I'm also scared. What are you scared of? That the kids won't like me, that I won't fit in, that I'll miss my old school too much. Sophie poked at her cereal. But also, I'm excited about the robotics lab and the art program and maybe making new friends who like the same stuff I do. Claire recognized the mixture of fear and hope in her daughter's voice. She'd felt it herself so many times. If you want to try it, we'll make it work, Claire said. And if you hate it, if it's too much or too hard or just not right, we'll figure something else out. Really? Really. This is your choice, baby. Not mine, not Mr. Ethan's. Yours. Sophie thought about it for another moment, then nodded firmly. I want to try. Then we'll try. Claire called Preston Academy that afternoon and accepted the scholarship. Then she sat down and made a budget for uniforms and supplies, determined to pay for as much as she could on her own. It would be tight, might mean picking up extra shifts, cutting back on other expenses, but it was important to her that she contribute. When she told Ethan that evening, he just nodded. How do you feel about it? He asked. Terrified, proud, worried I'm making a huge mistake. All of the above. That sounds about right. You're not going to offer to help with costs? You told me not to. Ethan's smile was tight. I'm learning to listen. It's harder than you thought, isn't it? Not jumping in to fix things? You have no idea. I've drafted like 15 emails to the school offering to endow various programs and deleted every single one. Claire laughed. Thank you for trying. I'm not just trying, Claire. I'm committed to this. To you. to figuring out how to be together without me constantly overstepping. He paused. Though I reserve the right to occasionally mess up and need you to call me on it. I can live with that. Sophie started at Preston Academy in the fall. The first few weeks were rough. She came home exhausted and overwhelmed, crying over homework that was suddenly much harder than she was used to. Claire stayed up late helping her study, reached out to teachers, advocated for her daughter in ways that felt both empowering and terrifying. Ethan helped where he was allowed to, which mostly meant moral support and occasional explanations of advanced math concepts that Claire had never learned. He didn't offer to hire tutors or make calls to the school or smooth any paths that Sophie needed to navigate on her own. It was hard for him. Claire could see the strain in the way his jaw would tighten when Sophie struggled, the way his hands would clench like he was physically restraining himself from intervening. But he honored his promise, and Claire loved him more for it. By October, Sophie had found her rhythm, made friends with a girl named Maya who was also obsessed with robots, joined the coding club and the art program, came home excited instead of exhausted, full of stories about projects and experiments and ideas. "She's thriving," Ethan said one Sunday afternoon while they watched Sophie show off a robot she'd built in her class. "She is," Claire agreed, "and I'm still terrified every single day that I made the wrong choice." That's parenthood, I think. Constant terror mixed with hope. "You sound like you know from experience." Ethan's expression went complicated. "Anna and I were trying for a baby when she died. She was so excited about being a mom, had all these plans and ideas about the kind of parent she'd be." He watched Sophie tinker with her robot. "I think she would have been good at it. Better than me, probably." "You're good at it too, with Sophie." "She's not mine, though. I'm just the guy who shows up on Sundays." Claire took his hand. "You're more than that. To both of us." The words felt significant, weighted with implications they hadn't fully explored yet. Ethan squeezed her hand but didn't say anything, and Claire let the moment pass without pushing. That night, after Ethan had gone home and Sophie was asleep, Claire sat at her kitchen table and looked at the life she'd built. The apartment was still small, and the heater still didn't work great, and she was still living paycheck to paycheck despite the better job. But Sophie was thriving. Claire was in love, and for the first time in years she felt like maybe the future held possibilities beyond just surviving. It wasn't perfect. Probably never would be. But it was hers, built through her own choices and efforts and struggles, and that made it worth more than any amount of money could buy. The years didn't smooth out the rough edges the way Claire had once imagined they might. She'd had this naive idea, back when she first fell in love with Ethan, that eventually the differences between their worlds would somehow dissolve. That money would stop mattering, that the gap between them would close, that everything would just get easier. It didn't. Sophie turned 10, then 12, then 14. She grew into a brilliant, opinionated teenager who could code in 3 languages and had strong feelings about ethical AI development. She also developed her mother's stubbornness and her own complicated relationship with the fact that her family straddled 2 completely different worlds. "Maya's going to Switzerland for spring break," Sophie announced one evening when she was 13, her voice carefully casual. "Her family has a chalet there." Claire looked up from the work she'd brought home from the diner. She'd been promoted to general manager 2 years ago, a position she'd earned entirely on her own merit, though she still sometimes wondered if Ethan's company had somehow influenced the decision. "That sounds nice." "Yeah." Sophie was doing homework at the kitchen table, or pretending to. "She invited me to come." "We can't afford—" "I know." Sophie's voice went sharp. "I wasn't asking. I'm just telling you what's happening in my life." The conversation ended there, but the tension lingered. It happened more and more often now. These moments where Sophie's 2 worlds collided and left everyone feeling bruised. Her friends at Preston came for money, the kind of generational wealth that meant summer homes and skiing in the Alps and college funds that had existed since birth. Sophie navigated those friendships with a grace that amazed Claire, but it clearly took a toll. Ethan noticed too. He and Claire had been together for 7 years now, living separately but functioning as a couple in every way that mattered. He'd proposed twice, once on Sophie's 9th birthday and again on Claire's 38th, and both times Claire had said not yet. Not because she didn't love him, but because she still couldn't shake the feeling that marriage would somehow shift the balance between them in ways she wasn't ready for. "She's struggling," Ethan said one night after Sophie had gone to bed. They were sitting on Claire's couch, She'd moved to a slightly bigger apartment 3 years ago, one with heat that actually worked and windows that didn't leak. Drinking wine and pretending to watch a movie neither of them cared about. I know she's struggling. She's 13. Everyone struggles at 13. It's more than that. Ethan set down his wine glass. She's caught between two worlds, and she doesn't fully belong in either one. And whose fault is that? The words came out harsher than Claire intended. Ethan's jaw tightened. If you're saying I shouldn't have bought that cake 10 years ago, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we created this situation. You and me. We made choices that seemed right at the time, and now Sophie's paying the price. What price? She's getting an incredible education. She has opportunities that make her feel like she doesn't belong anywhere. Yes, I know. Claire stood up, suddenly unable to sit still. Do you know what she said to me last week? She said she feels like a fraud at school because her friends think we're richer than we are. But she also feels like a fraud with her old friends from the neighborhood because now she goes to fancy private school and they think she's too good for them. So what do we do? I don't know, Ethan. You're the one who's good at fixing things. You tell me. It was a cheap shot, and they both knew it. Ethan had spent 7 years learning not to swoop in and solve every problem with money, learning to ask instead of assume, to support instead of direct. He'd gotten better at it mostly, but Claire still threw it in his face whenever she felt cornered. That's not fair, Ethan said quietly. I know. I'm sorry. Claire sat back down, suddenly exhausted. I just don't know how to help her, and it's killing me. We'll figure it out, like we always do. But figuring it out proved harder than usual. Sophie retreated into herself, spending more time in her room coding or building robots or doing whatever teenagers did on their phones. She was polite but distant, like she'd erected walls that neither Claire nor Ethan could quite scale. The crisis came 2 months later, right before Sophie's 14th birthday. Claire came home from work to find her daughter sitting at the kitchen table with tears streaming down her face, staring at her laptop. Baby, what's wrong? Nothing. Sophie slammed the laptop shut. It's stupid. Claire sat down across from her. Talk to me. I said it's stupid. Sophie. The story came out in bursts, angry and hurt. One of Sophie's classmates had posted photos from a party on social media, a birthday party Sophie hadn't been invited to. That alone wouldn't have been devastating, but the comments section was filled with speculation about why Sophie hadn't been there. They're saying it's because we're poor, Sophie said, her voice breaking. Maya tried to defend me, said we're not poor, but then someone else said, if we're not poor, why do I never invite anyone over, and why does my mom work at a diner? Claire felt something crack inside her chest. Oh, baby. And the worst part is they're not even wrong. We are poor. Compared to them, we're basically homeless. Sophie wiped her eyes angrily. I hate it. I hate that I care. I hate that I'm embarrassed about where we live and what you do. I hate myself for feeling that way. You're not a bad person for feeling that way. Yes, I am. You work so hard, and I'm sitting here ashamed that you're a diner manager instead of a CEO or whatever. Sophie put her head down on the table. I'm a terrible daughter. You're a 13-year-old dealing with impossible social pressures. That doesn't make you terrible. Claire reached across and stroked her daughter's hair. And for what it's worth, I'm not ashamed of what I do. I worked my way up from server to manager. I provide for us. That matters. I know it matters. But it doesn't change how people see us. Claire wanted to argue, to tell her daughter that what other people thought didn't matter. But she'd be lying. She knew exactly how much it mattered, how those judgments could make you feel small and worthless, and like you'd never be good enough. When Ethan showed up that evening for their usual Sunday dinner, even though it was Thursday, they'd long ago expanded beyond just Sunday afternoons. Claire pulled him aside and filled him in. I want to talk to the parents, Ethan said immediately, or the school. This is bullying. It's not bullying, it's just kids being kids, which is somehow worse because there's no villain to fight. So what do we do? I don't know. Claire looked toward Sophie's closed bedroom door. But I think we need to make a choice. Either we commit to her being part of that world, which means dealing with all the social dynamics and expectations that come with it, or we pull her out and send her back to public school. We can't pull her out. Her education, her mental health matters more than her education. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. You're right. So what does she want? That was the question, wasn't it? Claire knocked on Sophie's door later that night, after Ethan had gone home and the apartment was quiet except for the familiar sounds of the city outside. Can I come in? I guess. Sophie was lying on her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her room was covered in posters of female scientists and engineers, awards from robotics competitions, drawings she'd made over the years. The physical evidence of a childhood that had been complicated but full. Claire sat on the edge of the bed. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you want to stay at Preston? I don't know. That's fair. Let me ask it differently. If we took money completely out of the equation, if there was no difference between Preston and public school in terms of cost or social status or any of that, which would you choose? Sophie thought about it for a long time. Preston. The classes are better. The teachers care more. I'm learning things I'd never get to learn anywhere else. And Maya's there, and the robotics team, and I actually like most of my classmates, even if they're kind of clueless about real life. She paused. But it's hard, Mama. It's hard being the scholarship kid. It's hard pretending I'm something I'm not. Then stop pretending. What? Claire lay down next to her daughter, both of them staring at the ceiling. Stop pretending. Stop trying to fit into their world. Just be yourself. The girl who's brilliant and creative and, yes, comes from less money than her classmates. Own it. That's easy for you to say. It's actually not. I've spent my entire adult life feeling less than because of money. Feeling like I wasn't good enough because I didn't finish college or live in the right neighborhood or wear the right clothes. And you know what I've learned? The only person who really cares about that stuff is me. Everyone else is too busy worrying about their own inadequacies. Sophie turned her head to look at Claire. You really believe that? I'm trying to, and I think maybe you should try too. The conversation didn't fix everything. Sophie still had hard days, still came home upset about social dynamics Claire couldn't fully understand. But something shifted after that night. Sophie stopped trying so hard to hide where she came from. When someone asked why she never hosted parties, she started saying simply, "My apartment's too small, but we could do something at the park." When conversation turned to expensive vacations, she'd shrug and say, "We don't really travel like that." Some of her classmates drifted away, but others stayed, and those friendships deepened in ways that the superficial ones never had. Maya became a constant presence in their lives, a girl from wealth who somehow didn't seem to care that Sophie's apartment was cramped or that they ate dinner at the kitchen table instead of a dining room. "I like your place," Maya said one evening when she was over for a study session. "It feels like people actually live here. My house is like a museum. No one's allowed to touch anything." Sophie caught Claire's eye across the room and smiled. A real smile, the first one Claire had seen in weeks. The years continued their forward march. Sophie turned 16 and got her first job, working at the same diner where Claire had started, which made Ethan physically uncomfortable, but which Sophie insisted on. "I want to understand what you did for me," she told Claire. "Want to know what it's like to work for every dollar." She lasted 6 months before quitting to focus on school and college applications. But those 6 months changed her. She came home from shifts exhausted and frustrated, and newly appreciative of everything Claire had sacrificed. "I don't know how you did this for years," Sophie said one night, soaking her sore feet in warm water. "I'm dying after 6-hour shifts. You get used to it. Your body adapts." "Your body shouldn't have to adapt to that." Sophie looked up at her mother. "You deserved better. You still deserve better." "I have better. I have you." It was a cheesy thing to say, the kind of sentiment that normally would have made teenage Sophie roll her eyes. Instead, she just hugged Claire tight and whispered, "I love you, Mama." College applications were their own special kind of torture. Sophie had her pick of schools. Her grades were exceptional, her test scores high, her extracurriculars impressive. But the financial aid conversations brought all the old tensions back to the surface. "MIT is offering a good package," Sophie said, spreading acceptance letters across the kitchen table. "Full tuition plus some living expenses. I'd still need to take out loans for the rest, but it's manageable." Ethan, who was there for the college discussion because he'd become so integral to their family decisions, spoke carefully. "What about Stanford? I know their package isn't as good. I'd graduate with way more debt." Claire watched the two of them navigate the conversation, aware that Ethan was physically restraining himself from offering to pay for whichever school Sophie wanted. They'd had that argument privately 3 weeks ago, Claire insisting that Sophie needed to make this choice based on financial reality. Ethan arguing that he had more than enough money to send Sophie anywhere in the world. This is important to me, Claire had told him. She needs to understand the weight of these decisions, needs to know that actions have consequences and debt is real. But what if those consequences limit her opportunities? Then she learns to work within limitations, like the rest of us. In the end, Sophie chose MIT. She cried about turning down Stanford. It had been her dream school since she was 12. But she made the choice herself, based on finances and practical considerations. Claire was proud of her and heartbroken for her in equal measure. The night before Sophie left for college, the three of them sat in Claire's apartment eating pizza and pretending they weren't all on the verge of tears. Sophie was 18 now, brilliant and beautiful, and so much more than Claire had ever imagined she could be. "I'm scared," Sophie admitted. "What if I get there and everyone's smarter than me? What if I can't keep up?" "Then you'll work harder," Ethan said, "like you always have. And if that's not enough, then you'll ask for help. And you'll remember that your worth isn't determined by whether you're the smartest person in every room." Claire took her daughter's hand. "You're enough, baby, exactly as you are." After Sophie went to bed, early, because her flight was at 6 in the morning, Claire and Ethan sat on the couch in the dark apartment. "She's going to be amazing," Ethan said. "I know. Doesn't make it easier to let her go." "No, it doesn't." They sat in silence for a while. Then Ethan said, "Marry me." Claire turned to look at him. "What?" "Marry me. I know you've said not yet twice before, but Sophie's leaving, and we've been together for almost 11 years, and I love you, and I want to make this official." He pulled a box from his pocket. He'd clearly been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment. "I'm not trying to save you or fix you or change anything about our dynamic. I just want to be your husband, if you'll have me." Claire looked at the ring box without opening it. "Why now?" "Because I've spent 11 years learning how to be your partner instead of your savior. And I think I've finally figured it out, or at least I'm close enough that we can work out the rest together." He paused. "And because life is short and uncertain, and I don't want to waste any more time pretending we're not already committed to each other. We live in separate apartments, so we'll combine them. Or not. I don't care where we live, as long as we're choosing it together." Claire finally opened the box. The ring was beautiful, simple, elegant, not ostentatiously expensive, but clearly well made. "You've had this for a while." "About 3 years, kept waiting for the right moment." Ethan smiled. "Turns out the right moment is just whenever you're ready to say yes." "And if I'm not ready?" "Then I'll keep waiting. But I really hope you're ready." Claire thought about the past 11 years, the fights and the compromises, and the slow, painful process of learning to love someone from a completely different world. The way Ethan had learned to step back and let her make her own choices. The way she'd learned to accept help without feeling diminished by it. The way they'd both learned that partnership wasn't about being equal in every material way, but about respecting each other's autonomy and worth. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Okay. I'll marry you, but I have conditions." Ethan laughed. "Of course you do. I keep my job. I keep my apartment as long as I want it, and we sign a prenup that makes it very clear I'm not marrying you for your money. Done. Anything else?" "Yeah." Claire leaned over and kissed him. "I love you even though you drive me crazy, even though we're probably going to keep fighting about money and boundaries and all the things we've always fought about. I love you. I love you too, even though you're stubborn and prideful and refuse to let me help even when it would make life easier. Especially because of that." "Especially because of that," Ethan agreed. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony at City Hall. Sophie came home from MIT for it, and Maya was there, and David Chen stood up as Ethan's best man. Claire wore a dress she'd bought on sale and felt beautiful anyway. Ethan wore a suit that probably cost more than the entire wedding, but had promised not to tell Claire the price. The reception was at the diner where Claire worked because she'd insisted on keeping it simple and affordable. Her coworkers decorated with streamers and flowers from the bodega down the street. The food was diner breakfast, eggs and pancakes and bacon, because that felt more honest than some fancy catered meal. "This is perfect," Ethan told her as they danced to music from someone's phone, swaying in the middle of the diner while their small group of family and friends watched. "It's weird. Perfectly weird." Are you disappointed that it's not some big society wedding? Ethan pulled back to look at her. Claire, I have been to big society weddings. They're expensive and exhausting and usually more about showing off than actually celebrating love. This, he gestured around the diner, this is real. This matters. This is us. Sophie gave a speech that made everyone cry. She talked about the night a stranger bought her a birthday cake and changed 3 lives forever. About her mother's strength and her almost stepfather's quiet kindness and the ways that love could bridge even the widest gaps. I used to think wealth was about money, Sophie said. And maybe when I was 6, staring through that bakery window, it was. But I've learned that real wealth is measured in much smaller moments. It's measured in Sunday afternoon scrambled eggs and cardboard robots, and a mother who worked herself to exhaustion to give me opportunities. It's measured in a man who saw someone struggling and chose compassion instead of indifference. It's measured in the choice to keep showing up, even when it's hard, even when you're scared, even when you don't have all the answers. She paused, wiping her eyes. My mom taught me that you don't need money to be rich. You just need people who see you, who value you, who choose to love you even when it's complicated. And I'm the richest person in the world because I have her. And now I have him too. And that's worth more than any amount in any bank account could ever be. The applause was loud in the small diner. Claire caught Ethan's eye across the room and saw her own tears reflected in his face. Later, after everyone had gone home and the diner was cleaned up, Claire and Ethan walked back to her apartment through streets that felt different somehow, charged with possibility. They'd signed the marriage license but hadn't changed anything else yet. He'd go back to his penthouse tonight. She'd sleep in her own bed. They'd figure out the logistics later. That was a good speech Sophie gave, Ethan said. It was, though I'm not sure about that part where she called you her almost stepfather. You're her stepfather now. Officially. Officially. Ethan tested the word. I like it. They reached Claire's building and stood outside, neither quite ready to end the night. Thank you, Claire said. For what? For seeing us. That night outside the bakery. For stopping instead of walking away. For choosing to care even though you didn't have to. Thank you for letting me. For taking a chance on the weird billionaire who bought your daughter an inappropriately expensive cake. Claire laughed. It was a really good cake, though. It was an excellent cake. They kissed goodnight on the sidewalk, and Claire went upstairs to her apartment alone. She made tea and sat at her kitchen table, the same table where they'd eaten that first birthday cake 11 years ago, and thought about the impossible journey that had brought her here. She thought about the woman she'd been at 30, exhausted and desperate, and trying so hard to give her daughter a life that didn't hurt. She thought about that moment outside the bakery when everything had changed, not because of money or opportunity or any of the material things that had followed, but because someone had noticed her pain and decided it mattered. That was the real gift Ethan had given her. Not the job or the school or any of the practical help, just the simple act of seeing her, of treating her struggle as worthy of attention and care, of reminding her that she deserved better than what life had handed her. And maybe that was what Sophie had been trying to say in her speech. That wealth wasn't really about money at all. It was about being seen, being valued, being loved in ways that made you feel human instead of invisible. Claire had spent so many years fighting to be seen, by employers, by social services, by a world that seemed determined to look right through poor single mothers. And then Ethan had looked at her, really looked, and hadn't turned away. That was worth more than $4 billion, worth more than any amount of money could ever represent. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. I know we're doing the whole separate apartments thing tonight, but for the record, I miss you already. Claire smiled and typed back, Miss you too. See you tomorrow? Every tomorrow, for the rest of our tomorrows. It was cheesy and sweet, and exactly the kind of thing that would have made her roll her eyes 11 years ago. But now, it just made her happy. 4 years later, Claire stood in a crowd of parents watching Sophie walk across a stage to receive her diploma from MIT, summa cum laude, with a degree in computer science and job offers from 5 different tech companies. Sophie had chosen the smallest of them, a startup working on accessible technology for low-income communities. I want to build things that matter, she'd told Claire when making the decision. Not just things that make money. Ethan had looked so proud he might burst. You sound like your mother. Good, Sophie had said. I couldn't ask for a better role model. Now, watching her daughter accept her diploma, Claire felt Ethan's hand find hers and squeeze. They'd been married for 4 years, living together for 3 of them in an apartment that was somewhere between Claire's cramped walk-up and Ethan's sterile penthouse. They'd found a middle ground in most things, though they still fought sometimes about money and boundaries and the proper way to load a dishwasher. But they'd also learned that love wasn't about perfect compatibility. It was about showing up even when things were hard. It was about respecting differences instead of trying to erase them. It was about building something together that was stronger than what either of them could have built alone. After the ceremony, they took Sophie to dinner at the diner where Claire used to work. She'd left the job 2 years ago to start a nonprofit focused on job training for single parents, funded partially by Ethan's foundation but run entirely by Claire. It felt right to celebrate Sophie's achievement in the place where so much of their story had unfolded. I can't believe I'm graduating, Sophie said, looking around the familiar space. Feels like just yesterday I was 6 years old staring through a bakery window. That was a long time ago, baby. Not that long. I remember it perfectly, how cold it was, how badly I wanted that cake, how sure I was that I'd never get to have one. Sophie smiled at Ethan. And then this stranger showed up, and everything changed. I didn't change anything, Ethan said. You two did all the hard work. You gave us a chance to do the hard work. That matters. It did matter. Claire understood that now in ways she hadn't been able to 11 years ago. Ethan hadn't saved them, hadn't fixed their lives or solved their problems, but he'd created space for them to save themselves, had removed just enough obstacles that they could actually fight for something better instead of just fighting to survive. That was the difference between charity and compassion. Charity was about making yourself feel better by solving someone else's problems. Compassion was about seeing someone struggle and offering support without taking away their agency or dignity. Ethan had learned that distinction slowly, painfully, through years of mistakes and fights and promises broken and made again. But he'd learned it, and in learning it, he'd become someone Claire could actually build a life with, instead of just someone who made her life easier. "What's next for you?" Claire asked Sophie as they ate pie. The diner still had the best pie in the city. "The startup wants me to start in June. I'm going to move to Oakland, get an apartment with Maya. She got into a grad program out there." Sophie paused. "I'm scared, but also excited." "That's how you know you're doing something worth doing." "Is that what it felt like when you married Ethan? Scared but excited?" Claire looked at her husband, who was pretending to be very interested in his coffee. "Yeah, pretty much exactly like that." "Good. That's what I'm hoping for." Sophie grinned. "Not marriage, obviously, but taking risks, building something that matters, making choices based on what's right instead of what's easy." "You learned that from your mother," Ethan said. "I learned it from both of you, from watching you figure out how to love each other, even though it was complicated and messy and probably should have been impossible." Sophie's voice went soft. "You taught me that the best things in life are usually the hardest ones. That worth isn't measured in money or status or any of that external stuff. It's measured in how you treat people, in whether you see them when everyone else looks away." Claire felt tears building and didn't try to stop them. Her daughter, this brilliant, compassionate, extraordinary young woman, had somehow learned all the lessons Claire had been trying to teach her, had taken a childhood marked by struggle and transformed it into strength. That night, after dropping Sophie back at her hotel and saying their goodbyes before she flew back to pack up her dorm, Claire and Ethan walked through the city hand in hand. It was winter again, almost exactly 15 years since that night outside the bakery. "You think that little girl staring through the window would believe where we ended up?" Claire asked. "I don't know. Would that exhausted single mom believe it? Probably not. She'd think it was too good to be true." "And the lonely billionaire who bought an overpriced cake on impulse?" Claire smiled. "He'd probably be surprised too, that something that felt like a moment of weakness turned into the best decision of his life." It wasn't weakness. It was the first strong thing I'd done in 4 years. They stopped walking, standing in the middle of a sidewalk while people flowed around them. Claire thought about all the moments that had led them here, the fights and the reconciliations, the learning and the growth, the slow, imperfect process of becoming partners instead of savior and saved. "I'm glad you bought that cake," she said. "I'm glad you let me give it to you. I'm glad you kept showing up, even when I made it difficult. I'm glad you made it difficult, kept me honest. They kissed there on the street, and it felt like closing a circle that had opened 15 years ago outside a bakery window. Two broken people who'd found each other at exactly the right moment. Or maybe the exactly wrong moment that had somehow become right through years of work and compromise and stubborn refusal to give up. Because that was the real lesson, Claire thought. Not that money didn't matter or that love conquered all or any of those simple fairy tale truths, but that people were capable of seeing each other across impossible divides. That compassion could bridge gaps that seemed insurmountable. That showing up, day after day, choosing to care even when it was hard, could build something lasting out of the most unlikely materials. A billionaire and a single mother. A little girl and a birthday cake. A moment of kindness that had rippled outward into years of love and struggle and growth. It wasn't a perfect story. Nothing about it had been easy or simple or the way either of them had imagined their lives would go. But it was real. It was theirs. And it had taught both of them that the truest wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts or stock portfolios or any of the ways the world usually kept score. It was measured in moments like this, in hands held on cold sidewalks, in daughters who grew up knowing they were loved, in partners who chose each other every single day, even when it would be easier to walk away, in the simple revolutionary act of seeing someone else's pain and deciding it mattered enough to do something about it. That was the real fortune Ethan had stumbled into that snowy night. Not the chance to play hero or to solve a problem or to make himself feel better about his wealth, but the chance to be part of something genuine, to love and be loved in return, to learn that giving wasn't about grand gestures but about showing up, listening, respecting the autonomy and dignity of the people you claim to care about. And Claire's fortune? Learning that accepting help didn't make her weak, that letting someone care about her wasn't the same as being pitied, that she could be strong and vulnerable at the same time, that her worth wasn't determined by how much she could do alone, but by how she let others stand beside her. They walked home together through streets that had witnessed their entire journey, past the bakery where it had all started, closed now, replaced by a coffee shop, but still there in their memories. Past Sophie's old school, the diner where Claire had worked those exhausting shifts, all the landmarks of a life built from struggle and stubbornness, and ultimately, love. You know what the weird part is? Ethan said as they climbed the stairs to their apartment. I spent 4 years after Anna died thinking I'd never feel alive again, thinking that part of me had died with her, and then I saw Sophie crying outside a bakery window and something just cracked open. Hurt like hell, but it was the first thing I'd felt in years. So you're saying my daughter's pain made you feel better? Claire raised an eyebrow. That's kind of messed up. It is kind of messed up, but also true. Ethan unlocked the door. I think maybe I needed to remember what it felt like to care about something outside myself. Anna's death had made me so numb, so focused inward. And then there was this little girl who just wanted a birthday cake, and this incredible woman who was killing herself trying to give her daughter a good life. And suddenly I remembered what it felt like to care about other people's happiness. And now? Now I can't imagine my life without you two. Even though Sophie's leaving, even though things are changing, your family, the family I chose, the family that chose me back. Claire kissed him, long and slow, there in the doorway of their shared life. I love you. Even though you still occasionally try to solve my problems without asking. Even though you paid for Sophie's textbooks last semester after promising you wouldn't. You noticed that? Of course I noticed. I notice everything. I'm sorry. Old habits. I know. But you're getting better, Claire smiled. And I'm getting better at letting you help sometimes. We're both works in progress. Works in progress, Ethan agreed. I like that. They went inside, into the warmth and comfort of a home they'd built together. Not perfect, never perfect. But real and honest and full of the kind of love that came from really seeing each other, from choosing each other every day, with full knowledge of each other's flaws and limitations and all the ways they'd never quite fit together seamlessly. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.